You have found the Lines Injury Podcast for NFL Week 17. My name is Steven Andress, joined each and every week on this show by Will Carroll at Injury Expert on Twitter, the author of The Science of Football. And obviously, if you've been following along all season long, you know he is a man with more than 20 years experience covering injuries, writing about them, analyzing them and the recovery that goes along with them. Also director of bioanalytics at North Star right now. He's worked with professional teams in various sports directly as well to help them better understand injuries. So no man better to talk through some of the big injuries heading into week 17 to help us handicap these games a little bit better. Just to let everybody know, we are going to talk about Tua and his third concussion and go in depth on that and all of the different medical impacts, protocol impacts to go with that. But we're going to save that for the end of this podcast because I think it takes a little bit longer of a conversation, and we'll talk a little bit more about the more straightforward injuries, for lack of a better term, to get us started here. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. Let us know in the comments who you are betting on this week in the NFL and what injuries you want to know a little bit more about. And we'll keep an eye on those comments and circle back to them for week 18. We're going to keep this podcast going throughout the NFL playoffs as well and look into ways where we can apply Will's knowledge past the NFL season, talk to him and see what his schedule's like. Obviously, injuries impact every sport that we cover, every sport that we bet on. So we'll look into that as well. So first of all, Will, great to see you again. And I know that every week it's another challenge, it seems, here with Jalen Hurts is probably the big headline we'll start with here. But you've been digging in. Your column is up at thelines.com right now, and just every week it's a new list of guys, it seems.
It is. And that's not unusual. Football is a violent game. We see this in other sports, Boxing Day. Oh my gosh. If you follow European soccer, the injuries just came one after another, and some of them were just silly. They could have been prevented, and those are the ones that you hate to see. But in the NFL, we are seeing a different pattern to the injuries these last couple of years because I think the preseason, it'll be interesting to see exactly how this goes. But with Jalen Hurts, with a number of these quarterbacks, it's a story. And I feel pretty good about, last week we talked about Ryan Tannehill. Put more about him in the column at the Lines, but I talked about how, I always hate to see these things that say at the end of the season, you come back and they go, oh, it's this. Oh, he was fighting through that. Well, Tannehill was fighting through what I understand was a ruptured syndesmosis, the highest grade of high ankle sprain. Had to have surgery to stabilize this and allow the doctors to repair it. If he was playing through that, which it certainly seems like, that's impressive. They were using roll after roll of tape. His leg looked like an elephant there in those last couple of weeks, and he simply couldn't move. Had to be painful. So him fighting through that was tough, and now he's done for the season. They're going to shift it over to Malik Willis for these last couple of weeks.
Yeah, for sure. And a meaningless game really for the Titans in week 17, Thursday Night Football against the Dallas Cowboys. So we'll see if Derrick Henry plays, if some of their other guys who've been banged up playing, because literally this game doesn't mean anything to them. Win or lose, it's the same situation. They have to beat the Jaguars in week 18. And you mentioned Derrick Henry a little bit in your column this week.
Yeah, he's got a bruised hip. He was back at practice yesterday. Assuming he's going to be back at practice, it'll be a walkthrough today as they get ready for the Cowboys. But Bud Dupree is another one for the Titans. So Dak Prescott's got to feel pretty good about that. It's just a question of what happens here. Do they lay back and say, you know what, we're barely going to use him, and we get a combo of Malik Willis and Hassan Hawkins? That's not great for the Titans, a team that's already been struggling. So it'll be interesting to see exactly how they handle this. Obviously Henry's been putting up a lot of things, and if Mike Vrabel rests him in Week 17, which is the fantasy championship for so many people, the fantasy nerds are going to be out with pitchforks and fire.
They will. The bettors have been lining up to back the Cowboys at this point. This spread was 9.5. We're up to 10.5. There's an 11 as we record on Wednesday afternoon here. Total of 40.5. So you do the math on that. You know, the Titans have an implied team total of around just 14 to 15 points here. So it's about as low as you typically get in an NFL game, short of just crazy weather and wind like we saw with the Cleveland-New Orleans game. So nobody really giving the Titans a chance in this one. I would be Mike Vrabel's a sharp coach. I'd be surprised if they play anybody who's really banged up in this one because it literally means nothing. This is basically a glorified preseason game for the Tennessee Titans at this point.
Exactly. The only thing – Vrabel, I look back, he's been coaching a while, there's a little bit of data on him. He does tend, even in meaningless games, he doesn't tend to pull people early. In week 16, 17, now we got week 18. In those games when you talk about resting people for the playoffs, he hasn't. So I think he's going to at least put people out there for some. But if I tell you, I think Derrick Henry's going to play but have a reduced role, that's where my money would be going. And my money would be going on the Cowboys, even giving away 10, 11 points.
Let's look ahead here to Sunday, New Year's Day, and the Philadelphia Eagles are still in limbo with their starting quarterback, Jalen Hurts, who's dealing with a shoulder injury. This line was 6.5, then it moved to 7. Now we're back to 6.5. Just my pure speculation, I think it's probably going to be Gardner Minshew again this week after they looked really damn good, in my opinion, offensively against Dallas. It was only turnovers that got in the way for them. It wasn't their inability to move the ball. So, but with Jalen Hurts' injury, we're seeing all kinds of speculation here, Will. We're seeing that he still has a chance to play this week. We're seeing that if they clinch the 1 seed, they might just keep him out until the divisional round of the playoffs. So what exactly is he dealing with here? And in your estimation, how hard is this to play through? And if he does sit out until the divisional, is he going to be 100%? A lot of questions I just threw at you, so kind of take them in whatever order you want.
Yeah, let's deal first with the actual injury. And that one's not common, but it's simple. Okay, your clavicle, your collarbone goes from here in your chest all the way over to your shoulder. It's basically the hanger that your entire torso is based off of. So it's got to be stable. This is why a broken collarbone is so devastating, because you have to protect that area. What we thought was that it was an AC joint sprain, the acromioclavicular joint, where the clavicle attaches to the acromion process, which is the point of the shoulder here. It's not that. It is a sternoclavicular. So if you follow your collarbone all the way into where it meets your sternum, the big giant bone that covers your heart, that's the joint that got stretched a little bit. Any ligaments stretch is a sprain. So grade 1 sprain here. It's a really thick, and it obviously doesn't move very much. All you got to do is push in this area. And, you don't want your sternum moving inwards by very much. So first, you got to think about how much force was transferred in when he landed on that shoulder to move it here. So you get an idea. The second is it does affect it because there is, if you go up there and make a throwing motion, you can feel. I'm
doing this with you, trying to feel it.
You can feel. You need to do the other side. Join on the same side. You can feel your sternum and the clavicle articulate just a little bit. It's not a big motion, but especially if you pull it all the way back. So that's what it is. That's the joint
subtle.
that has been sprained. Yeah, very subtle. So that's the joint that's been sprained. But you can see how it affects his throwing motion. If it hurts for him to go back and cock his arm for a throw, then he's likely to drop his arm, throw off his mechanics, throw off his accuracy, things that he's been working on so much with such great result over the last couple of years. So could he play? Every indication is yes. Should he play? I don't know. That's between the medical and Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts. Obviously they lost last week. They're still in place for the 1. They won't know. It's a 1:00 start, so they won't know. They have to make a decision beforehand. I don't think they're really going to play the whole 1 seed thing. I don't know that he's going to play, which is why I think the line is moving so much. I think he could play. I think we'll see that line shift back and forth. It surprises me because I thought Gardner Minshew was pretty solid. He doesn't do the same things that Jalen Hurts does, and I think that hurt him a little bit. But do you take the risk? The Saints aren't a bad team. Do you take the risk of putting Hurts out there, trying to get the win, trying to lock up that number 1 seed? And in that case, then you rest him the next week and you get the bye. For Hurts, I don't know if it's that important. So honestly, I just don't know at this stage. This is one where it's going to have to be a value decision by the medical and coaching staff. On the other hand, here's where injury context comes in.
Okay.
Off to his right, Jalen Hurts or Gardner Minshew is not going to have Lane Johnson. And he is a key, whether it's Mayada on the other side, whether it's Johnson. That line, Kelsey in the middle, that line has been so good, so consistent, so coherent all season long. And Johnson was down with what's said to be a tendon strain in his abdomen. Now, I don't know which it was. And watching the game back, he was grabbing one side when he was down. As he was walking off, he was rubbing the other side. And usually that's a pretty fair indication. If you get hit in the mouth, you grab your mouth. If you pull your hamstring, you grab your hamstring. Usually what you guard is what you hurt. And since it was on both sides, I don't know what that was. But Johnson's out not only this week, but next week. The bye is very key to him. And you have to factor in, if Johnson's not there, is Hurts going to get hit more? Is Minshew going to get hit more? You can give up a little bit on Minshew if that happens. Does that factor in the decision on Hurts? Yeah, I think it absolutely has to. So you lose a lineman, makes a decision on the quarterback, makes a decision on the game, which it's funny. It's moving the line probably 3 points on the decision between Minshew and Hurts, and that's a lot. I realize Hurts is an MVP candidate, but 3 points is a lot for a quarterback that's proven. It wasn't just a one-game fluke. Minshew's a real quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, there are Eagles beat reporters and, super fans that might argue that Lane Johnson is just the best overall player on this team with how reliable he is on the offensive line. So that's an interesting nugget as well in this whole equation of whether or not the Eagles go all out to try and win this week against the Saints. I don't think they're going to bench any other key starters other than the ones that are injured, obviously. But in terms of the clinching scenarios for them, if they were to lose to the Saints, they can still clinch the 1 seed this week, but it's highly unlikely. They would need Dallas, Minnesota, and San Francisco all to lose. But the interesting part is, even if they lose to the Saints, they can just beat the Giants coming up here the following week, the final week of the season, and get the 1 seed. And it's the Giants who might not have anything to play for, because if they beat the Colts this week, they clinch their playoff spot. So the Giants could be you could be in a weird situation next week where you have the team with the amazing record and the team that's a wild card. The wild card team not playing anybody, not having anything to play for, and the team with the amazing record playing to make sure they get a bye in the playoffs. So that obviously
is what the system was supposed to do. So kudos to the NFL for setting the schedule that way. It used to be the 2-bye system, and by expanding the playoffs and changing the schedule so these teams are playing in-division games the last couple of weeks, it has made it more exciting. It has worked as intended.
For sure. Yeah, it's a lot of different scenarios here still up in the air. That is definitely for sure. If the Eagles could get a bye with the 2 seed, I think we'd already have our answer on what their strategy would be. So, definitely something to monitor there for sure. Last question for you. If they do rest him until the playoff game, the divisional round, any reason why he wouldn't be 100% at that point?
No, I think he could very reasonably play this week. It comes down to pain tolerance and risk. He was fairly close to being able to play last week, from what I'm told, talking to a very good source with the Philadelphia organization. But they ruled him out early. They said, we're going to wait, even though it's the Cowboys. Obviously that's a rivalry. They're taking the long-term view on this. So I don't think so. I don't think there's any long-term consequences. Obviously, if you give them a couple more weeks of rest plus the bye, absolutely. But they're already factoring in the bye. So, that whole team gets rest. I think it's more important if you could chain it together. If you could give a number of guys rest in week 18 versus 18 in the bye, kind of really 3 weeks of rest. Obviously, that last week you're re-prepping for the playoffs, but you can go easy on guys So there's a lot of scenarios here, and the sports science department over there in Philly is one of the better ones. But that said, they've also got to deal with the fact that we're seeing a lot of fatigue injuries. We're seeing a lot of wear down injuries for a team that's been so good for all the season. If they break down here at the end of the season and in the playoffs, all that's for naught. There's no trophy for being the best team through week 16.
No, there is not, unless you're in the sports betting world where you cash some overs on the wins and some alt overs and all that. That's about it.
Let's be very clear after this week that nobody with the Eagles organization appears to be betting on games.
Yeah, that's true. So the Detroit Lions are also in the playoff mix here, which is so much fun.
Crazy to say, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. It's so much fun. I have a 3-1 ticket on them to make the playoffs, so still holding out hope for me here. Jamal Williams, the leader in rushing touchdowns this season, is banged up here. He has a sprained knee. How severe is it, and what can you tell us about it?
I don't think it's that severe. They put him back in the game for a couple of plays at the end of the game. He went out in the third quarter, was able to dig up some video, and it does look like he got hit on the outside of his knee as he was running. That's the classic MCL mechanism. It's the ligament on the inside of the knee, keeps it from bending in and hitting the other knee. So if they let him back out there, he was at least stable. There was probably some swelling, a little bit of pain. They'll be able to give him treatment through the week. So I don't think it's severe, but he hasn't been back at practice. So was there something else? Was there a meniscus involvement?
As of this morning, Dan Campbell did say Jamal Williams will practice. We don't know.
That's great. I hadn't seen that. I knew as we spoke, I hadn't seen.
And that's huge on a Wednesday, right? On a Wednesday for that to happen.
If he's back today, that's certainly a good indication. I still think, especially because of his role. I mean, DeAndre Swift was playing, and going back to him not playing, I think part of that is just what was happening. They were so far down to the Panthers in the surprise game script that they were in a hurry-up offense for much of the third quarter, all of the fourth quarter. And that's DeAndre Swift's role. So Williams I don't think he wasn't out there mostly because of the injury. And the fact that he's practicing gives this more credence. I think it was just, the other guy's role is locked up because we're down 18 points. So I do think he'll be back out there. I think he'll have a little bit of reduced touches. He could have one of those weird fantasy weeks where, it's 5 carries for 5 yards and 2 touchdowns. But, from a Lions perspective and from how Williams' injury affects the line, I don't think it's significant because DeAndre Swift is a good back. He's not as good a power back. But if you can only use Williams in those 3rd and 1, 4th and 1 goal line situations, that's not bad. That gets him doing exactly what he's best at. It doesn't wear out DeAndre Swift by banging into big bodies. So I think for the Lions, this is a very good scenario. So I would move them back to where I would normally in my model.
61 points in the first meeting between these two teams, a 31-30 nail-biter win for the Lions in Chicago back on November the 13th. The spread right now for the rematch, Lions favored by 6. Big number, total of 52 in this one, in this divisional matchup at Ford Field in Detroit. More on this breakdown on the Megapod, which you guys can listen to on our YouTube channel this weekend. I have a feeling at least one of our hosts is going to be interested in taking the points here with Chicago and Justin Fields. So we'll see. We'll see if I'm right about that. The Seattle Seahawks. Typically, when I see a wide receiver break a finger, it's going to be hard to catch a ball. Tyler Lockett is dealing with that fractured finger. It's only been 2 weeks if he plays in this game, or I guess he will have only missed 1 game. Yeah. I was surprised that he has a chance to play in this one. Why does he have a chance? And if he does play, I mean, this has got to increase the likelihood of drops, I would assume.
Yeah, I don't know if he can catch, and I don't know if he knows whether he can catch at this stage. We're not going to see him in practice. Pete Carroll said that he doesn't care if he practices. But I bet he does care if he can catch.
Yeah, and, I would think so.
They'll have him in. That's my next point. They'll have him indoors on a jugs machine, seeing whether or not he can catch it. Going back to this, he broke his finger on a Sunday, had surgery on the Monday morning. Before you and I had our coffee, he had 3 pins put in his finger. And
they must have that doctor on speed dial, by the way, to be able to schedule a surgery on Sunday night for Monday morning.
Oh, no, that's team doctor. And that first section of Monday is always on break. They got
to just cordoned off in the schedule in case of injury. We got this slot.
I can't tell you a team doctor, at least north of Pod, who doesn't have 6 to 10 blocked off every Monday.
Wow.
And right now, Jim Andrews, Neil Elatrosh, a couple others, plus the team doctors, for the day after the season, that Monday and Tuesday, they'll block off the whole day. And those guys will be working because all those surgeries that teams were able to put off, guys that played through things, they'll all have those the day after.
That's a fun little behind the scenes look at like the Google calendars of team doctors in the NFL. I didn't realize that they just cordon off times in their schedule for it. That's wild.
Yeah. And if you can go down and sit in Jim Andrews' waiting room on one of those Monday or Tuesday mornings after the season, you'll see just tons of people coming through. Autograph seekers know that one, which is why most of these hospitals have a secret entrance. Back to Lockett. Whether he can catch or not is going to be interesting because it is difficult. I'm curious whether they're just going to bring him out there as something of a decoy. DK Metcalf was getting double covered, still did pretty well. Geno Smith had a decent enough day in the loss. But I think it's one of those things where even as a decoy, he has some value. So we know he can run. I mean, he didn't break his leg. He broke the tip of his index finger. So could you get him out there running? Be safe? Yeah, absolutely. His finger's pinned together. It's not going to re-break unless you really do something. So even as a decoy, he's going to have some value. If he can actually catch the ball, I think you're going to be able to see this. This doesn't help gamblers unless you're in betting live. Watch to see if they get him on a lot of turnaround routes where he can see the ball and work it into his body. Because then you can catch it and pull it in without taking all the pressure on your finger. If you have to reach out for the ball, I'm trying to stay in screen here, and have the ball come and catch the tip, you're going to catch that with the tip of your finger exactly where it was. So he's going to have to go, I forget which finger it is, but you normally use both hands.
Catching away from your body is going to be more painful than if you have your body.
Yes, if you can basically bring it in and trap it. If you're looking for him to make one-handed catches with that hand, no, not going to happen. Diving catches are going to be tougher for him. Those ones where you scoop under it, because again, the index fingers take more of the pressure. He's going to try to catch him with his palms, basically. And so certain sets, especially ones where he's facing the quarterback, are going to be easier for him. Slants are going to be tough. Deep balls aren't going to be that tough just because you run under it basically and you're taking some of the speed off it. So I do think he's going to play. I think we'll know early whether he's a decoy.
Moving along to the Cincinnati Bengals, who have a huge matchup this week against the Buffalo Bills on Monday Night Football. And a reminder, if you are a Bengals fan living in Ohio, the launch of legal sports betting is on New Year's Day. If you go to thelines.com/Ohio, you can get all the best sportsbook signups and bet credits without even having to deposit. Did they know that
when they made the Monday night schedule?
I don't know. That's a good question. I think it worked out well because the entire slate of NFL games other than Thursday night is on New Year's Day. So yeah. I think I will tell you that when it comes to the states picking which day to launch on, they often are trying to get ahead of big events, whether it's opening day of the Super NFL Bowl or the Super Bowl, or for Massachusetts, they're trying to get it open by March Madness. So that very much is in play, the opposite side of it. So, but
I can imagine those local commercials. There's probably an auction for those for DraftKings and FanDuel. And so Cincinnati, Columbus, and Cleveland local stations are making that election season money.
Yeah, congratulations. Your election day commercials are gone. Here's 1 million sportsbook commercials. That's what it's going to be.
How well those work out.
Yeah, for sure. So Lyle Collins is sadly done for the season. And it's a big blow because the offensive line was average at best, and for the early part of the season, really poor. So, but your typical ACL, anything else to worry about here with him?
Yeah, well, first, Burrows is going to get hit more, and that's the worry. I took a look at some of the PFF data, and Collins was the rock over there. If you watch back on a lot of game video, he tended to shift to his right where Collins was, meaning that's normally where there's open space. So if that isn't there, that means the pinchers are coming. The rush is coming up the middle and blowing Burrow up. He's going to get hit more. That's bad. That's just bad. With Higgins, Boyd, Chase, he's been able to throw all over the place, put up big points. They've hit the over. I know they beat the spread more than almost any other team. So it's one of those situations where it's just going to make the offense worse. How many right tackles are difficult? Right tackles often aren't the best guy. It's normally where you hide a tackle. Maybe you put your run mauler over there. But we're seeing more of that. Lane Johnson on the right after being sort of a failed left tackle early in his career after being a first-round pick. It's one of those situations where we just don't know how it's going to react. Is the cohesion of that unit going to break down more because you've got a backup over there and the communication isn't there? Does he screw up a switch? Do they get stunned more? The Bills are going to be doing all of that and more. They're going to throw the kitchen sink at the Bengals regardless, but now they're going to be trying to confuse them. They're going to be showing late blitzes, I'm sure. So this is just a bad situation. For Collins, yeah, it's interesting. There was a lot of somebody from the Bengals organization leaked out, hey, he'll be back in 7 months. And I don't know why 7. That's a really specific number. For a isolated ACL, you would normally say 6 to 9. And we've even seen those get complicated. For ACL, MCL, meniscus, as Collins had, this is very comparable to Chase Young. And we've seen Chase Young didn't come back until last week. So it was better than a year for him. So if I say that I'm wondering whether Collins is going to make it back for game 1 next year, I think that's reasonable. I don't know where this 7 months number came from, but it's too specific to have not been told to somebody. I don't think 2 journalists independently came up with.
Yeah, that would be training camp. That would be in time for training camp.
Yeah, which, again, I wouldn't be stunned if he did this, but I would be a little surprised. I would say, wow, that's quick. I hope he's okay. I'm sure the doctors are doing well. I don't know if he's had the surgery, but again, we've seen complications go further on. So with Collins out now, out to the playoffs next year, we'll deal with next year.
Is it easier for an offensive lineman when you're dealing with an ACL? Like we talk about a lot about skill position players. You talked about Chase Young, obviously still speed rush is important for that and quick twitch. But for an offensive lineman that's basically just trying to be a wall, I know they're moving a little bit on run blocking, but is it easier for that position?
No, it's actually harder because think about it. A wall has to be stable. You don't want a wobbly wall. You don't want a wall that shakes in the wind. And so, he's got to be stable. He's got to have full confidence in that knee. They've got to be able to shuffle. And that knee can't be buckly. You can't not be sure. Now, most linemen, especially in college, wore braces. There is no reason these guys don't wear braces. I know it doesn't prevent every injury, but it does add stability, especially early in a return. He'll have plenty of time to rehab. He'll have plenty of time to go through. But it really does affect linemen. Offensive linemen have to be stable, just like you see foot injuries with them. If they lose that stability, the ability to be able to push off the ground, create ground force, it is really problematic.
2 quick injury updates on quarterbacks before we talk about Tua here. Aaron Rodgers was added to the injury report Wednesday. He's not practicing. He has a knee issue. It reportedly isn't going to keep him out of the game, but that's something to monitor, Will. And also Lamar Jackson still not practicing. And now we're getting towards the longer end of the timetable here that you had expected. So what's your reaction to Lamar still not practicing as we begin another work week?
Yeah, this is interesting to me because we'd like to see him running. There have been reports that he's running behind the scenes, that he's doing drills, he's doing agility. Those are the kind of things you want to hear, but it's also the kind of things you want to see. I just want to see him run. That would make me feel better. That's one of the signs that he's getting closer. Doing it all behind the scenes, that's usually when they're not real comfortable. They don't want to see somebody limping. Though the Ravens obviously have put J.K. Dobbins out there, he's got a severe limp. He's functional. I don't think he's going to re-injure himself, but he's not 100%, which actually ought to make Ravens fans pretty happy. First, they feel comfortable with him out there at less than 100%, and he's got room to improve from what he's been doing the last couple of weeks when he's looked pretty good. Same thing with Jackson. I don't think they want to risk him. Tyler Huntley's good enough, and their playoff position is pretty well locked in, so they're not going to move a whole lot. I don't know what they have to risk by putting Jackson back out there. That said, I want to know if they're just essentially giving Jackson more time, or whether Jackson's injury is more severe. Because here we are at 4 weeks. This was supposed to be a 1 to 4 week injury. I always thought this was going to be more like a 2 to 6 week injury. So I don't think it's like extended or more severe, but I haven't seen the progress either. We just don't know on Jackson. So as we get to playoff time, what are we going to get? Do they want to see him have at least some game action before the playoffs? I would think so, just to get him back to game speed. But right now, it doesn't look like it.
Okay, let's talk about Tua and the third concussion that he's had this season. And I want to talk about this from a couple of different angles here, Will. First, I want to talk about just the process now of what the team is going through and determining whether or not he can clear the protocol and come back to play this season. And then we'll talk about what the debate has been all over football, social media, and the talking heads on TV constantly. Everybody trying to, exercise their social media medical degrees and determining whether or not he should A, come back this season, or B, ever play again with these concussions that he's had. So first of all, not the first time we've talked about this with Tua this year, but for those that are unaware, the concussion protocol changed in reaction to what happened with Tua the first time around. That's still the reality we're living in here, but they've essentially all but ruled him out as of Wednesday, which kind of flies in the face of going through the protocol. So, what is your read on what actually he is being put through in terms of his evaluating his symptoms and whether or not he's ready to play, and whether they are doing something different with him than they do with other players who get a concussion?
Yes. Okay, let's define the concussion protocol. The concussion protocol is the overall joint procedure of how to deal with concussions, from determining whether or not a player has one, calling down and making sure that a player is examined, how those examinations are taken, and then how you return. When guys like you and me say concussion protocol, we're normally talking about the 5-step process from having a concussion to coming back and being cleared by the independent neurologist. That is having a day of no symptoms, being able to have some physical activity without a recurrence of symptoms. Normally you'll get on a treadmill or a bike for 20 minutes, see whether or not you have a headache, that's all. The third step is that you go out and have a limited practice. You're not necessarily doing drills and other things, or out there doing physical football activities. Fourth step is you go through a limited practice. You do everything but contact. And we see that late in the week, that becomes a problem because, you can't do that if a team's doing a walkthrough. So sometimes you'll see a team, do one play and suddenly call that a full practice. The fifth step is that you see the independent neurologist. That normally happens on either a Friday or a Sunday morning. The reason for that is that either you're going to wait until the last possible second on Sunday morning and later, and then on if you do it on a Friday,
to give you the best possible chance
hours.
Of being cleared, I assume.
Yeah, you got to have 48 hours. So if you do it on Friday morning, you have you can retest on Sunday theoretically. So with Tua, he's going through those steps, like it or not. They can say he still has symptoms, so he's staying in step 2. Still has symptoms. I don't know that he has symptoms, but you can say it. So he's not going to practice until next week now, we hear. So he's not going to have the opportunity to go through step 3. So he's been ruled out for this week. The doctors have done that. That's their decision, and that's fine. That's why you have team doctors to make those kind of decisions. As to whether he should play again this season, next year, ever, that is absolutely between the doctors, specialists that he's consulted with, Tua and his family. He's got to make that decision. We know that in the short term, most players can come back from concussions and play well. Most symptoms clear up in that 1 week period. The protocol's in place to make sure people don't come back early. So in case you do have one where the symptoms linger, and we've seen this 2 weeks, 3 weeks, there's some symptoms that never go away. But this comes down to a medical and a personal decision. This whole 3 strikes and you're out stuff, why are we putting a number on it? If one concussion happens,
what do you mean by that? By the way, you've heard. So from what I read in your column and posting it, when you say 3 strikes you're out, there's been some talk and speculation from other doctors around the country this week that there should be a 3 strikes and you're out for the season policy when it comes with concussions. And what is your reaction to hearing that?
No. First off, you're not examining those players. You're not there with them on a day-to-day basis. Neither am I, which is why I don't make those kind of decisions, why I try not to involve myself in those decisions and not speculate. For me, 3 concussions, 5 concussions. Why are we drawing a line when we don't know where the line is? 3, if it's 3, why is it not 2? If it's 2, why is it not 1? It comes down to the player being informed. They're making millions of dollars to put their health at risk. That's part of the informed consent. Years ago, we didn't know that. We didn't use the best practices. We were kind of hiding what was going on with that, and teams weren't being honest with the players. That's why there's a big lawsuit. That's why there's a settlement. That's why both sides are taking it much more seriously now, because we saw how serious the long-term consequences are. That said, you can take a look at quarterbacks from the last 20 years. You see them every Sunday. Those guys aren't showing a whole lot of symptoms of CTE to me. If you see Dan Marino or Boomer Esiason or Tony Romo is probably too young. Peyton Manning seems to be doing okay for himself. So
let me give one counterpoint. Let me give you one counterpoint to that, though. Jim McMahon has talked a lot about what he's gone through with his head injuries.
Absolutely.
He's a quarterback that took more hits.
Exactly. And that's the worst case. Well, maybe not the worst case. There's been guys worse than him, but he's
more extreme end of the spectrum with quarterbacks.
Yeah, exactly. But we don't know that it was 3 that did it. Would a 3 strikes and you're out policy have helped him? No, because these guys were getting their bell rung every week and going back in the game and taking more hits. So they weren't being treated the same way players today are. The thing that really bothers me is that it's fairly clear that Tua had a concussion in game. You can take a look at his play. People have pointed to the plays they think he got concussed. I'm not sure of it, but should he have been tested? I don't know. The spotters having missed it for one guy twice this season is problematic for me. I know we're missing concussions because, there's subconcussive impacts all over the place. You saw Derwin James get ejected. He led with his head. Actually, if you watch the tape, didn't hit the guy in the helmet. He hit him in the shoulder. He led with his head, was ejected for that, and darn well should have been. So we're taking this seriously. What I would love to see is sensors in the helmet. I would love to see sensors in the helmet. Riddell has a system that they've had for several years, and the NFL doesn't allow to be used. But we could have actual data, G-force data on what kind of forces these guys are taking. I think they're scared of it. I think they don't want to know, honestly. And I think we have to get past that fear and get to an age where the data empowers us. So I would much rather see a system like that than some random number thrown out there, X strikes and you're out.
That technology, is it a situation where you would let the data help you establish a baseline, and then anything over a certain level of impact as a player whose helmet gets triggered to come off and get checked for a concussion. How exactly would that be implemented in an NFL context?
That's the question. You would have to sit down and really come up with something. There was a study done, this is better than a decade ago, by Purdue, used similar sensors. It was much more primitive and raw at that stage. But one of the things they saw was a nearly 100 G impact, which is like car crash level. And they were like, wow, when did this happen? And they looked back at the tape, and it was two players. I think they were two freshmen or sophomore that didn't play, and they were just being goofy and firing each other up before the game even happened and just headbutting each other. And I was like, wow. And they had no symptoms at all. So it's one of those weird things. Maybe that was a sensor error. I don't know if you set off a thing. There was Isaiah Kaczynski, who was I think he went to Harvard and then played in the NFL, invented something 10 years ago called the check light, which was a sensor. And when I forget exactly what the number was, but when it hit a G level, a light turned on the top of your helmet. And so a system like that was great. Problem was, the high school kids that were testing it realized, hey, I want to light this guy up, literally. And so they were targeting him to try to make it happen. And that's just, dumb high school football players being dumb high school football players. You can imagine that guys like Derwin James or Jalen Ramsey, guys who are out there wanting to make the big hit, would do just that. And there's guys like us who grew up watching, NFL's biggest hits on VHS. So I don't know if there's a perfect solution. What I'd love is for the NFL to say, we're going to put in the sensors, we're going to investigate this, and we're going to sit down with the best scientists. And with the NFLPA, we're going to agree on a procedure that comes in next year.
But for the people that are saying that Tua should never play football again, or that he should be out for the rest of this season, there's no firm science or data to back that up at this point, sadly, right? It's just, to me, I think the people that are saying this mean well. It's also, what's the phrase I'm looking for?
It's a personal decision. It is a medical decision, just like anything else. Do you want to do this with your life? If I got nasty comments and I didn't like them on YouTube, and I said to you, Steve, I don't want to do this anymore. That's a personal decision. That's not the case. But, for Tua and his family, I think, they've got to make the decision. Do I want to continue to play football? Think about this. This is a guy who has 2 tight ropes in his ankles. He's got a repair in his hip that I don't think any other football player ever has had. And now he's had multiple concussions. Does he want to continue to do this? That's between him and the doctors, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah.
And if he does want to play, then he has to decide what level of caution does he want to take in terms of his timeline of recovery, right? So,
I think he has to be symptom free. I think he has to kind of trust that the process works. And if he doesn't, if he's worried, what can he do? Could he get a better helmet? I don't know which one he wears. Could he add more padding? Probably not. That doesn't really seem to help. What could he do? Heck, I don't know of any quarterback wearing a Q collar. Maybe that's something he should look into. There's a number of things he can do. If he's not comfortable going out there, if any player, Luke Kuechly's probably the best example of this, was no longer comfortable going out there, could not make a hit without thinking, is this the one where I get that bad concussion? Is this the one that pushes me over the edge? If he's having those fears, he shouldn't play, and neither should anyone else.
And my last question to you is, with what we know now and the data that's been collected, and this topic being covered extensively over the past decade or so, we have no idea whether or not Tua has crossed the threshold of long-term damage, CTE damage, or not, right? We have just no way of knowing that.
No, there's no way of, short of him dying and taking his brain out in an autopsy, there's no way to know whether he has CTE. There's blood tests that are being developed. There's functional MRI tests that are being developed, but we have absolutely no idea why some people get it and end up like Jim McMahon, or why some people don't get it and end up, Peyton Manning or Boomer Esiason, or one of these guys that have been out of the league 20, 30 years and aren't showing those symptoms. That's it. There's a lot of guys. If you ever watch one of those NFL reunions, I remember the NFL 75 thing where they walk the players across. I could tell you, I think it was 45 of the 75 had at least one knee replacement, because you can tell that distinctive walk. So these guys are paying some price, and part of that is their brain. And unfortunately, that's the area we probably know the least about. We can fix an ACL, we can pin together a broken finger. Concussions, there's not a whole lot we can do.
Awesome insight, as always, Will. Especially, I mean, this concussion topic is so complex and so confusing for a lot of football fans out there. Thank you for giving us some knowledge and some information on this to help us navigate this a little bit better. We will go back to doing these shows after the holiday season here on Fridays. On Wednesdays is a little more difficult, obviously, to get firm answers on these injuries with. It's just the first day of the injury report for games that are on Sunday, but thanks for bearing with us as we adjust for the holiday schedule here in our remote office world. As always, everything we do at thelines.com is completely free. Check out the Discord channel, top right-hand corner of thelines.com homepage. You can go there under the roles server, click on the emojis, and get push notifications anytime anybody on our staff locks in a bet. I've already fired off a bunch of them this week, got some great closing line value already. That's the best way to get the best of the number if you want to see how we're all thinking when it comes to NFL betting. And of course, you can always follow Will Carroll on Twitter at Injury Expert. Read his great column every week on thelines.com to get the latest injury information and context for all of these NFL players as the postseason rapidly approaches. For Will Carroll, I'm Steven Andress. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week here on thelines.com.